North Carolina, USA, and I'm excited to be chairing this panel on implementation and basic income. Our first presenter is Peter Knight, a good friend of mine on the BN board, and he will be presenting why we are moving toward a federal universal basic income in the United States. I'll mute myself and hand it over to Peter.
So I'm really divide this presentation into two parts. First, what the polls tell us, and that there is an upward trend, and then we'll look at what we think are main factors behind this trend and increase in the support for universal basic income in the United States. So, let's see if we... So we're looking at the polls that are collected by the Basic Income Center, and we see in 2011, if I could see my screen, and then an increase over time, and it's consistent across parties. Of course, it's stronger for the Democratic Party than for the Republicans, and the median for independents. Yeah, I can't see my slide very well, but if maybe you can. So that's key factor number one is the concern for the net impact of technology on employment. And research on this is controversial and inconclusive. Most analysts agree that technological change can be disruptive, and exponential change based on computing power can require new skills, and they occur in different places and from jobs that are destroyed. That's a pretty well agreed thing. This is a particular concern regarding the impact of robotics and artificial intelligence. Many Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and creators of these exponential technologies have come to support UBI, creating a favorable public publicity. For instance, Altman, Branson, Dorsey, and Elon Musk. Campaigns and the creation of the new Forward Party. Yang proposed a $1,000 a month freedom dividend back in, which was a UBI of $1,000 a month for US citizens, and that was during the campaign for the president in this Democratic primaries. Yang participated in 6 nationally televised debates before suspending his campaign for POTUS in the New Hampshire after the New Hampshire primary. While he did not get much time to speak during the debates, he did get a chance to advocate for the freedom dividend. Yang focused on the impact of automation, robotics, and AI on employment in justifying his proposal. In his 2021 campaign for mayor of New York, Yang proposed an unconditional cash payment of $2,000 a year to 500,000 of the poorest New Yorkers, leading some other candidates to adopt similar positions for a federal UBI and call for a federal UBI. In October 21, Yang founded the new Forward Party, and it had as one of its 6 core principles UBI. After merging with the Serve American movement, SAM, and the new Renew America movement, this was removed from basic principles, leaving it to be decided in conventions what would be the position of the Forward Party. But Yang himself continues to be a believer in UBI and has spoken in the opening session of this conference to that effect. Direct cash transfers during the COVID-19 pandemic is the third factor that I think has been important. And these, I will not repeat it all here, but we've had first $1,200 per adult and $500 per child in the CARES Act of March 27, 2020 under Trump. Then in December 21, 20, a $600 per person cash payment for those earning $75,000 or less. And then under Biden, the direct cash payments for individuals, married couples filing jointly, $1,400 per dependent. So this was a very substantial monthly payment, and they altogether about $1 trillion in cash payments went out during the COVID-19 pandemic. Then the pandemic itself has created a greater sense that cash payments are a reasonable thing to do. More positive attitudes in the UBI in the US and the UK were found in some recent studies. Pandemic brought greater fractions of the population into the precariat through no fault of their own, favoring a universal solution. Another study argued that the pandemic has accelerated automation and robotics, so robots don't get sick and minimize human interactions. Yet another study concluded that the normalization of financial hardship increased empathy for financial need. Finally, the pilot programs at the municipal level of Stockton, at the time, Michael Tubbs started the first one and later created Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. And now there are 88 mayors in large cities in 29 states are participating. 48 of these have pilot programs underway and more expected to be launched in 2022. They also created a new research institution to try to coordinate research on these pilots and systematize them. The goal of the center is to consolidate the key learnings from the pilots taking place in the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income member cities, to address knowledge gaps in the contemporary understanding of guaranteed income's impact for Americans and allow the organization to layer data and anecdotal evidence in a federal advocacy for UBI. The Income Movement has launched a pilot community and engagement program to support municipal pilots. In general, polling data shows that the public support for UBI has been increasing since 2011. 6 factors are likely to be responsible for this trend. No research directly links these polling results to these factors. That depends on future polls testing these hypotheses. That's the end of my presentation.
Peter. We will have questions at the end, but at this point, I will turn the mic over to Zelleke with NYU Shanghai. She'll be presenting incremental steps towards BI, individualizing taxation in the US. Welcome, Dr. Zelleke.
Hey, Leah, nice to see you. Okay, so I've shared my screen. I hope everybody can see my slides. I still see Peter's.
Do you click the share your screen button on the bottom?
Okay, now it looks like mine has replaced Peter's. Okay, so I have been thinking about the transition to a basic income in the United States for many years. I'm hopeful, as Peter is, that we'll see a basic income in the United States at some point. At the same time, I've been looking at literature on the taxation of marital couples and more generally gender effects of the taxation system in the United States and in other countries. So I always like to begin with a statement of my values and assumptions about basic income. Let me see, my slides are not advancing. Let me see if I can get that to advance.
Oh, the
Okay. So, as I said, I'd like to start with just a statement of what the goals are for a basic income in my view, and the fact that I have a feminist perspective on basic income, so I'm very interested in the effect that different implementation strategies will have on gender inequality. So, how does the implementation of a basic income interact with joint taxation of married couples? Every tax system faces the question of whether to tax married couples as individuals, the same way they would be taxed if they were not married, or to pool their income and tax them jointly. In the United States, we have currently full joint taxation of married couples. Most advanced economies have a mix of individual and joint taxation. In other words, it's somewhere in between, depending on tax exemptions and deductions that are applied on a household basis, even if income is taxed on an individual basis. But in the United States, we have full joint taxation. So how does this interact with a basic income? Well, I want to make three claims in my paper about joint taxation of married couples. Joint taxation of married couples is, I argue, in an administrative tension with an individual basic income. If taxation is based on pooled income, but the basic income is meant to be an individualized benefit, there's an administrative tension there. The point that I'm going to be focusing on in this presentation is the fact that joint taxation of married couples creates a second earner disincentive that discourages the paid employment of the lower earning spouse. Often in the United States, that's the woman, which reinforces gender divisions of paid and unpaid labor. I also, in the paper, make a claim about the marriage disincentive effects for low earning couples, but I'm not going to be able to address that in this presentation today. So just a little background on taxation of married couples. There is what's called in the literature a marriage tax trilemma, which is that in systems of progressive taxation, you can either have what's called marriage neutrality through individual taxation or couples neutrality through joint taxation. So marriage neutrality means that single taxpayers and married couples with the same total income pay the same in taxes. And under couples neutrality through joint taxation, married couples with the same income pay the same in taxes. So progressive tax brackets are either applied per earner under individual taxation or per person under joint taxation. And what this means is that single taxpayers and single earner married couples, that is a married couple where there's only one earner, pay higher taxes than equal earner married couples with the same total income under individual taxation, and single taxpayers pay higher taxes than all married couples under joint taxation. So every country has to make a decision about which system to choose and understand the effects of the system that they choose. So this is what it looks like in the United States. You can see we have a zero tax rate bracket, which is what we call the standard deduction. It's doubled for married couples filing jointly, and most of our tax brackets with different tax rates are also doubled until incomes rise above about $430,000. what does this mean in terms of taxes due? So here I've shown a simplified version of the U.S. tax system. It doesn't include any deductions or payroll taxes or state and local taxes. This is just federal income tax. And what you see is that in the first row that I've labeled working class, the taxes that single taxpayers pay when they have an income of $50,000 is higher, 70% higher than the taxes that married couples pay. And that's that discrepancy is true all the way through the tax rates. In this slide, what I'm showing is what the taxes would be due under individualized taxation of married couples. So here you see that the single taxpayers and the single earner married couples pay the same tax, and equal earner married couples pay lower taxes at every level of total income. And that's because both of the equal earner spouses in the equal earner married couple take advantage of that zero tax bracket rate and the lower tax bracket rates before they get to the higher ones, whereas when the income is just earned by one person, they move up through the higher tax brackets at a faster rate than an equal earner married couple would. The distortionary effects of joint taxation of married couple are that, in fact, they primarily serve to lower the taxes of single earners and primary earners in unequal earner married couples. And the historical record demonstrates this very clearly. The income tax system was an individual tax system when it was first created in 1913, and it was through lobbying by wealthy men who had wives who did not earn income and who wanted to somehow shift some of their income to their spouses so that they could take advantage of the lower rates for two people rather than paying higher rates on their own income. And the inter-household tax burden shifts from high-earning primary earners in married couples to single taxpayers under joint taxation of married couples. And the intra-household burden within married couples shifts from primary earners to secondary earners. And this is what creates the secondary earner disincentive that I really want to focus on here. So there's been a lot of literature on the tax system and the gender effects of the tax system in general, but it's only recently that I found literature that estimated or quantified the effect of shifting from joint taxation of married couples to individualized taxation of married couples in terms of married women's paid labor force participation. So this table is showing you that this is average hours worked annually by married and single men and women across 18 European countries and the United States. It shows, not unexpectedly, that married men have the highest hours, married women have the lowest hours. But what this also shows is that there is a higher deviation between countries of the relationship between men's hours and women's hours. So standard economic theory would tell you that the total tax rates that are higher in many European countries have a disincentivizing effect on paid labor force participation. Right, the higher the taxes are, the less labor you're going to supply because you don't get as much from it. But there's quite a discrepancy between the effect that those taxes have on men and women in terms of their paid labor force participation. So the question is why? Also, here is here's the answer. This figure is showing how far countries' tax systems deviate from individualized taxation. Right. So the diagonal line would show that the average tax rate faced by a single woman is the same as the average tax rate faced by a married woman, and where the countries that line up along that line have fully individualized taxation, and those countries are Greece, Hungary, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. And all the countries above the diagonal line have moved in some degree towards joint taxation of married couples, which, as we'll see, will have a depressing effect on women's labor force participation, because as women enter the labor force, they are facing higher marginal tax rates than they would under individualized taxation, and in fact, than the primary earners did in their marriages and their families. So actually, just one other point is the U.S., where the U.S. is actually pre-2017. In 2017, the law changed again in the United States, and we, after a period where we had somewhere in between individualized and joint taxation, we now have fully individualized taxation again. So the U.S. is actually further to the left of the diagonal line currently. So what the authors did, and this research has been conducted by Alexander Bick and Nicola Fuchs-Schundel, was to model the effect of a shift from joint individual taxation on hours worked, and compared it to the shift from moving from progressive taxation to flat taxation, linear taxation as they term it, but flat taxation. So what you can see in the left panel is that in the countries that were in the previous chart that had the biggest distance between those countries and the diagonal line, Germany and Belgium, they have in panel A the highest increase, modeled increase in women's labor force participation on this chart. The other thing that you see is that the lighter color is men's labor force participation. So what you see is that if you shift from joint taxation of married couples to individualized taxation of married couples, in some countries, in several countries, men's hours in paid labor also decrease. So why is this important? Well, many feminists want to see a less gendered distribution of labor between men and women, and one of the fears has been that a basic income, insofar as it provides a form of compensation for unpaid care work, might induce more women to stay at home and not participate in the paid labor force, which is thought to have detrimental effects for women's equality overall. What this research demonstrates is that actually it is the tax system that has the largest effect on whether women supply labor in paid labor and how many hours they supply. So the concern about basic income is really misplaced. The concern should be instead on the system of taxation of married couples. If we want to increase the labor force participation of married women and decrease the labor force participation of married men so that we have more equality between the two, the way to do that is through the tax system. And I think we should worry less about basic income. In any case, in the paper, there's more information about all of this and about the other two concerns that I had about the integration of an individualized basic income with a joint system of taxation, and also on the marriage disincentive effects of joint taxation of married couples on lower earning income couples, where they often face very steep withdrawal rates from other tax benefits and means tested benefit programs if they join together in households, whether they marry or not. Their income is pooled, and that moves them out of eligibility for programs much faster. But I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Dr. Zelleke. So next we will move on to Thiago Souza from Minho University, presenting Citizens Basic Income and the Marica Brazil project. Take it away. Thiago, are you with us? Okay, I am not seeing, okay. Thiago, I see you in the participants, but okay. All right, why don't we move on and come back to Thiago. Maybe they're having tech issues. Why don't we turn it over to Michael Steinmann with the Stevens Institute of Technology, presenting a paper, Is it possible to have a right to happiness, UBI, as a way to secure well-being? Are you there, Michael?
Yes, I'm here. Hang on, I need to get my slides. Oh, yeah. So, hi, thank you very much. Title of my presentation is, as you had said, Is it possible to have a right to happiness, a UBI, as a way to secure well-being? I start from the assumption that a UBI makes people happy, that it has that kind of positive effect, and that happiness might be a strong justification for the introduction of a UBI. Thinking about happiness in this way, I think also requires us to rethink the overall role that happiness plays in social and economic policies. In general, what I want to show is that the right to happiness would concern the overall relation of society towards its members and the very purpose that a society should have for them. And I'm doing this from a philosophical perspective. I'm not a sociologist, I'm not an economist, I'm not a political activist of sorts. I'm doing this to clarify some of the basic conceptual questions that might be involved in using happiness as a justification for a universal basic income and subsequently a right to happiness. Now, why should happiness be a concern for policymaking? I think the case is easy to be made. We have seen increased precarity in our work arrangements, cost of living, and increased inequality as well, all of which have a tangible and measurable effect on mental well-being. This empirical fact, I think, can now no longer be attributed to individual factors or whatever biological variation people thought might have caused it. It is, we can say, sociogenic. At the same time, we live in liberal societies, at least in Western societies, for which mental health is, first of all, a private phenomenon and falls mostly under individual responsibility. In this case, one could say, in a slightly polemical vein, that liberal capitalist societies are inherently cynical. They are cynical insofar as the anxiety that their arrangements provide is seen as a sort of inevitable side effect. They're cynical insofar as there seems to be the assumption of a certain lottery, according to which happiness can only be distributed to some, and some will forever remain unhappy with the way that society works. And there's a certain Hobbesian legacy, one could argue, that is still very prevalent, according to which we cannot expect happiness to be a universally shared goal for the simple reason that others might just not care about my happiness. I'm simplifying here, of course, and this is a more polemical than a nuanced image. On the other hand, I think we can ask ourselves, is there in fact anything in place in our social structures, in our support structures, that would really prevent anxiety, depression, and stress to be produced? And I think we won't find much, so the diagnosis of a certain cynicism in social arrangements might stand. We need what I call a new psychopolitics, which would see the goal of promoting a positive well-being, promoting the well-being of citizens as its goal. It would also be a form of politics that sees happiness as a universally shared goal and tries to contribute to it. But even if one would not support such a form of politics, I think one cannot really deny that assumptions about happiness, about individual well-being, have inevitably a certain effect on social policies and behavior, and that especially negative assumptions about the unachievability of happiness or the unworthiness of happiness compared to other experiences has a negative effect on policies and behavior as well. So whatever we think about happiness matters, I would argue, and it matters how we articulate the basic goals of our politics. How can UBI increase happiness? I'm trying to summarize a few of the arguments. First of all, I would assume that financial means are necessary for social connection and participation. People need money for everything they do beyond their immediate family. Lack of money has verifiably negative effects on people, and money does make us happy, at least insofar as we talk about social experiences and activities that require certain material means. Money might not make us happy from a strictly personal point of view, but here we are talking about happiness as it is experienced in society. From a negative perspective, UBI prevents scarcity and decreases the likelihood of unhappiness. I think this is something that is safe to say, and that's a theme in many presentations on this Congress. From a more positive perspective, I see 4 reasons in which UBI can, in fact, increase happiness. It can help what is often called eudaimonic happiness, which is the use of personal abilities over the course of time. People are happy when they do what they want to do and what they feel good at doing, which is again different from more temporary and fluctuating experiences of hedonic happiness. UBI, through its unconditional character, can introduce a universal feeling of desert. In our capitalist and liberal societies, we think that whatever we earn is deserved, which means that even our poverty is deserved and can be attributed to a lack of effort, a lack of education, and the like. The fact that every citizen would have a certain form of income through UBI can be interpreted for these people to mean that they deserve to be supported in such a way. And I would assume, hypothetically here, that this would have a very positive effect on their mental well-being. A UBI, again, through its unconditional character and also through its institutional character, if it exists, would allow people to plan better for the future. It is money you can just simply count on that allows them to assess their lives from a more long-term perspective, which in turn makes it possible to develop evaluative perspectives on life that recognize a higher degree of happiness in it. Scarcity, and this is well shown in research, leads to a certain reduced focus on the present, which in turn increases anxiety. And the fourth reason, go back here. The fourth reason would be that a UBI is individually effective. It helps individuals in many ways, but it is not individually invasive. It is fully compatible with core liberal values. And that's the important point going forward for a right to happiness. So UBI can likely increase well-being insofar as it promotes practical skills, self-evaluation, self-care as planning for the future, and the freedom of decision-making in citizens. Now, what if we establish happiness as a right and then take a UBI as one of the means to secure such a right? What does it mean to have a right to happiness? There is a whole set of objections that arise almost immediately with such a notion, and I want to, in the second part of my presentations, address these possible objections to show how one could work around them and why a notion of a right to happiness might actually more coherent and more feasible than one might think. Objections can revolve around the question whether happiness can be made a right, whether it needs to be made a right, and whether it should be made a right. These are 3 different perspectives that one can have, and one can ask whether then happiness as such should be a social goal, and whether a right to happiness would work as a right, which gives us 6 possible objections, and I will briefly go through them, trying to highlight the ones that seem most important to me. Now, if one objects against happiness as a social goal, the first objection would be that happiness is not universally attainable and it is not measurable. Secondly, one could say that one does not need to target individual happiness because our societies, through the inevitable technological progress, so the argument goes, will make us all on aggregate happier. We just have to wait for progress to work this out. Thirdly, one could say that happiness is no dominant value. There are higher values that we should strive for: competitiveness, entrepreneurship from a capitalist point of view, patriotism, or even values related to religious affinities, where people would say that our community or our attachment to a higher being is more important than our individual happiness would be. Then regarding happiness as a right, one can say this can never be implemented because it would be absurd. Should we be able to sue the government if we have a bad day or something along these lines? One could also say it's not needed because the right to happiness is already implemented through other rights. And finally, it would contradict core liberal values. Again, all these objections are hypothetical, as the right to happiness is hypothetical. I want to show how we can think of such a right as coherently as possible, again, from a philosophical point of view. A right to happiness can be defined as a right to have effective, meaningful rights. This means that we already have, of course, a whole set of liberal rights in Western societies. The right to happiness would not simply be put next to these existing rights, but it would be the right to use these rights in a way that guarantees personal fulfillment. Liberal rights are often established in an abstract way, in a formal way, and the effective use depends on, for example, financial means, which means that liberal rights cannot guarantee their own realization in individual lives, and the right to happiness would be precisely the right to have one's right being usable in an effective and meaningful way. This then allows me to counter some of the objections to conclude this presentation. Coming back to the question whether happiness should be a social goal, can it really be implemented? Positive psychology shows that it can. We have a lot of research that shows that happiness is actually achievable, especially insofar as it can be considered a social phenomenon. We cannot wait for utilitarian increases of aggregate happiness to happen, I would argue, but we have to think in a more egalitarian way about the happiness of every citizen. That's why we need a right to happiness. And happiness is certainly not the most dominant value or the sole value of a human life, but at least it is a value that is important when it comes to the negative effect that society can have on its members. So I would argue, and of course this would take more time to be proven, that from an ethical point of view, we cannot accept members of society to be unhappy insofar as they are members of society, or insofar as society in its arrangement makes them unhappy. So no one should be unhappy because society makes them so. That's the main argument. This is why we can focus on happiness as a goal of social politics. This leaves open that people might be unhappy for individual reasons, but ethically speaking, they should not be unhappy because society doesn't allow them so. Now, can such a right be implemented? Would it be absurd to have a right to happiness? I think, like many fundamental rights, a right to happiness would need to be further explained and restricted, perhaps. So it's not a right that one can simply claim individually vis-a-vis the government. So it's a broad-based right with further sub-rights linked to it. We do not need it. I think we do need it because it would entail a certain duty on the side of the government to assess current rights, procedures, and policies for their effectiveness and for the positive effect that they have on the mental well-being of citizens. So it is a right that very much puts society in a self-assessment mode, one could say, in which we further examine whether our liberal rights are actually conducive to individual fulfillment. And should it not be implemented, again, I would argue that a right to happiness would be fully compatible with liberal values. So it is not a right that gives the government any kind of intrusive power over the psyche of citizens. Happiness is just simply the result of the use of freedom, I would argue. And in showing this, one could say that with the right to happiness, we move from negative freedom, the fact that we should be left alone from the government, to a positive freedom where the goals that we have and the fulfillment that we achieve is considered an important factor. Again, these are arguments to conclude that can be made to show that we have a feasible concept here that can be used as a further justification for UBI if one desires a more philosophical justification, and also a right to happiness, even if the legal implementation might just be far off, can at least perhaps be claimed as a moral right, and therefore, again, a moral justification of a universal basic income might be achieved. Thank you very much.
Michael. All right, Thiago, have you joined us? We'll go back to you. Okay, please jump in if you are able to join us. I'll move on towards our final team presenting towards a municipal basic income with the Basic Income Research Action Lab. Andrea, Gama, are you presenting for that team?
Hello, do you hear me?
Hello.
I'm gonna be a presenter today. Let me start. Good morning. It is a great pleasure to be here. My name is Choi Ki-hoon. I'm a researcher in the Basic Income Research Group at Gyeonggi Research Institute in South Korea. GRI is a public research institute for Gyeonggi Province where 13 million people are home. Our Basic Income Research Group of GRI was established in April 2019 to study basic income policies in Gyeonggi-do. A brief introduction of our work will be presented here today. In addition, some more research works will be presented at 2:30 afternoon today, so if you are interested in hearing them, you are already invited to come. This presentation is an outcome of collaborative work by Vital, alongside Freibis in Germany, GRI in South Korea, and the Marica Basic Income Project team in Brazil. I will tell you more about Viral before moving on to the main topic. Viral was born an initiative to connect different research teams engaged in basic income as a means to enlarge and create a platform whereby we can share the knowledge emerging from different parts of the world and then reach each other's actions. And we've just launched a podcast channel titled Voices of Basic Income. Of course, it is to make basic income a reality for most people worldwide. So BITER, Basic Income Research and Action Lab, is a series of seminars to share and analyze the experiences of already existing pilots and basic income movements worldwide, facilitating roundtable discussions and knowledge sharing between political leaders and researchers interested in UBI globally. We will continue with our presentation towards municipalist basic income. Currently, at viral meetings, our team discussed basic income experienced in Brazil, South Korea, and Germany. Each of those will be talked about a little bit more today. In this presentation, we hope this will be an opportunity to share what is going on in each part of the world and how we can find meaningful discourses at the end of today. Basic income systems. So now I'm introducing our fantastic member from Brazil, Andrea, to you. She is participating in Marica Basic Income Project team and working hard to investigate its case.
Hello, I'm Andrea Gama, Research Assistant in the Marica Basic Income Program Evaluation, that's being conducted by the Universidade Federal Fluminense and the Jane Family Institute, and I'm glad to share with you a little bit about Marica's Citizens Basic Income Program today. Marica is a coastal city in Brazil in the metropolitan area of Rio de Janeiro, with a population of approximately 167,000. The municipality stands out for having a comfortable budget allocation, mainly from oil royalty revenues. Since 2013, the municipal government has been implementing social programs and initiatives to promote local development. One example of this would be the creation of a community development bank, the Mumbuka Bank, and the local digital currency, the Mumbuka. One of the purposes of the Mumbuka Bank is to distribute cash transfer programs in social currency. Because many of Marica's residents work in nearby cities, using a local currency is a way to keep the resources circulating within the city. In 2019, the Citizens Basic Income Program was created through a municipal law, being an updated and scaled up version of different cash transfer programs that already existed in the city. It is now a benefit paid per individual and is eligible to residents of Marica of at least 3 years, prioritizing families with lower income, that is, families with total earnings of up to 3 minimum wages per month. There are currently 42,000 beneficiaries, around 1/4 of the population, and receiving 200 Mumbukas per month. Each Mumbuka equals to 1 real, the national currency, and the citizens' basic income is equivalent to approximately $39 or euros per month. The municipal government provides the Mumbuka Bank with the beneficiaries list and the total amount of the benefit, and the Mumbuka Bank issues the local digital currency, the Mumbuka, through the payment of the benefit by distributing it to the beneficiaries' Mumbuka Bank accounts. The beneficiaries of the Citizens' Basic Income can only spend their Mumbukas in businesses in the city. The Mumbuka account works similar to a digital banking platform, and any resident of Marica can open an account, although most of the accounts are of beneficiaries. The Mumbuka accounts can be used to make purchases in the businesses registered at the Mumbuka Bank to receive Mumbukas. Once the beneficiaries receive their monthly benefit, they can spend it in over 12,000 registered businesses in the city that range from big chain restaurants and supermarkets to small informal businesses. In turn, these businesses that receive revenue in Mumbukas can also use the local currency in other businesses. They can make transactions with regular users, or they can cash out their Mumbukas by paying a 1% fee to the bank. Businesses that accept payment in Mumbukas pay a 2% fee per sale, and the amount generated by these fees feeds the Mumbuka Bank Fund, which finances the bank's social activities and low-interest microcredit lines. The Marica's Basic Income Program and the underlying structure of a community development bank and a social digital currency is an example of a municipal program that gradually took form and expanded, influencing not only the creation of other social programs in the city that use the same structure, which allows for rapid response of the municipal government in times of crisis, as was with the COVID-19 pandemic and the increased demand for cash transfer, but also other nearby cities that are now implementing similar programs. Not only the recipients benefit from the program, but because a considerate share of the population receive the citizens' basic income and therefore spend it in Marica, local businesses and other residents can also benefit from the circulation of the resources that hopefully contributes to the promotion of local development. That is one of the program's main goals. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Andrea. And these are some pictures of what it looks like in Marica. Next one is Suckers UBI in Berlin. In part, our excellent member Julio will explain what Suckles UBI is, how it works, and so on. Let me begin.
Hello everyone, my name is Julio Linares and I currently serve as public outreach for the Basic Income Earth Network, and I'm also the convener of Viral through Bien. And so in my section of the paper, I want to share with you a bit about the Circle system, which is a basic income system that we have developed through using blockchain technology in the city of Berlin, where we are currently piloting it. Currently, we have about 120,000 people that have open accounts worldwide, but the pilot itself consists of about 1,000 people who are using circles in differentiated ways. Now, the model that we use in circles is based on a subsidy model similar to the Gyeongi system, whereby the Circles Cooperative has made promises to about 20 or so businesses to accept circles and to give them euros in return as a way to decrease risk, as at the beginning of the pilot, of course, the fungibility of the currency isn't so high. So this redemption model allows us to increase the supply of goods and also to allow for more business-to-business interaction. So one of the goals of the pilot is to create a type of resource merchant network that strengthens the local economy, so building local linkages across the supply chain, and thereby decrease the exchange rate to euros. So the amount of circles that businesses later exchange for euros decreases as more exchange happens within the economic network. In terms of the actual monetary structures, the circle system is based on a peer-to-peer issuance of money or direct monetary creation from the perspective of people. So it is not a central bank or a private bank that issues the money, it is people that issue the money from the bottom up, so to say. So because of that, we do not have political sovereignty or political authority, but nevertheless, the subsidy model allows us to still create a pretty dense economic network. The pilot has been going on for about 1.5 years, and we're still in a research and development phase. So it is organized by the Circles Cooperative and the community. We have monthly assemblies where people can come together and ask questions, organize the different parts of the economy that they would like to be part of, and so on. And in terms of how this peer-to-peer issuance of money works, we have 1 circle per hour rate, or about 720 circles, which is equal to about 72 euros in a month. And so the way we have analyzed the system so far is by mixing two types of sciences, or 2 methodologies. So one is network science and the other one is anthropology. So basically what we're trying to do is to analyze the data from the network in order to understand what are the relationships and the clusters of relationships that happen. So on the left you see an example of the economic network in circles, with the big green dots representing clusters where a lot of economic action is going on. Then what we basically try to do is to understand not just where are the sort of big clusters of economic action is happening, but also the cyclicality around the network. So for example, we can locate 3 actors across the supply chain and say, okay, how are these actors engaging with each other? How are they exchanging with each other? And when they exchange with each other, what happens? So does trade become faster, exchange become more fluid between them, and also creates more multiplier effects? Does the velocity of money go up or down? And things like that. And then we can use anthropology and ethnographic methods to understand better what are the relationships that are being developed on the ground, and how could we better create interventions to help and strengthen those business-to-business sectors, and also the business-to-people relations. With that, I will end my section and pass it on to Gihon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you for your huge contribution. Here you are looking at some brief explanation about UBI Berlin and some pictures as well. And now is my turn to say a little bit of Gyeonggi-do briefly. I think it is helpful to warm up. Gyeonggi-do, or Gyeonggi Province, is the most populous provincial authority with 13 million people, and is located surrounding the capital Seoul. As its name Gyeonggi literally means, Gyeonggi-do has been a leading basic income policy implementer in South Korea. So far, 4 different types of basic income policies have been implemented, and a few more are to be incarnated. Gyeonggi basic income is not a full basic income, but a modified basic income between the ideal and the real, so that we can take a possible step and then head toward the way to the ideal. This is related to another characteristic of municipal level implementation by provincial self-government. Even further, its finance comprises half from Gyeonggi-do and another half from basic local governments, which can be an excellent example of governance. Gyeonggi basic income policies are integrated with local currency, similar to Monbuka in Marica, and these basic income policies are established upon municipal ordinances, legislation, and actually practiced basic income experiences. Lastly, the size of beneficiaries is relatively massive, and there is still space to fill in. As you look at the table, there are 5 different types of Gyeonggi basic income in practice. Youth basic income for youth, farmers basic income for agricultural personnel, rural basic income for rural residents, disaster basic income as COVID-19 relief aid, and artist basic income, which is under discussion with the new governor of Gyeonggi. You can find reports and full details on the GRI webpage. I want to emphasize its structure since Gyeonggi basic income is implemented independently from the central government. That means it is difficult without rights to taxation or with political controls. Gyeonggi-do solved this problem by its unique form, with half from the provincial authority and another half from basic local governments. In the case of disaster basic income, even though there was disaster relief fund of the central government, it became a structure with Gyeonggi basic income on top of the central government's aid. And I am just telling you that the first round of Gyeonggi disaster income was about a month faster than the disaster relief fund. Furthermore, you can imagine some basic local governments within Gyeonggi-do did top up more than the others on top of Gyeonggi basic income. This situation is also shown when the other Gyeonggi basic income policies are practiced in local cities and counties. Another point is that Gyeonggi basic income is integrated with Gyeonggi local currency, which can be used locally as small businesses. Gyeonggi local currency is not only supplied with basic income policies, but also can be purchased by anyone with incentives, generally with a 10% discount. It is issued as a debit card, mobile, or paper, can be used as a same unit of Korean won. Until now, we have explored what happens in each location, and it is time to find the similarities and differences among these basic income experiences. So what are similar and what are different? First, they are unconditional and individual but not universal. Second, the citizens' basic income and Gyeonggi basic income are paid in local currency. Third is beneficiaries. In the case of Marica, the basic income policy is for people with low incomes. But in Gyeonggi-do, its reach differs depending on its purpose and design. Fourth, monetary sustainability, money orientation. The citizens' basic income in Marica is financed from oil revenue, and in Gyeonggi-do, its fund is provided by the provincial basic local government's budget. Berlin's case relies more on blockchain technology and networking. And Marica cases are examples of municipal basic income based on policy, but their structures are somewhat different. Berlin's case is more experimental, so we need to keep eyes on it. So this is a short brief of comparison with 3 experiences in one view. So how many minutes do I have?
2.
It's okay. Thank you. The motivation for basic income system is as verified as their concrete material implementations. Creating basic income systems using social currencies show that the limitations are not only merely economic but political. The experiences of Marica, Gyeonggi, and Berlin show that basic income is already possible today. It's challenging preconceived wisdom about the nature of welfare and its distribution, imagining new paths forward to institutionalize basic income. Discussing basic income seriously is to think about how it plays into the contemporary debates on monetary and fiscal policy and the broader geopolitical context of today. Whether it is poverty alleviation, new finance systems, wealth redistribution, or regional economic protectionism, the three cases show how different political and economic goals can be reached through the introduction of local monetary fabric which can grow to embed the economy of cities, regions, of potentially nations, continents, and even of the planet. Also, we found how basic income systems cannot be detached from the broader political economy they are embedded in. Further studies will explore innovative methodologies to study these three systems, such as using network science to understand the cyclical nature of economic trade when basic income is introduced, and ethnographic methods that complement and make the data meaningful. This is pretty much for today, and thank you everyone for the time, and thank you especially for the team buyer.
Viral team. Okay, one last call for Thiago. Have you had any luck? Okay. To give Thiago a few more minutes to join us, why don't we take any audience questions? I don't see any, but feel free to put your questions in the chat. I know that the audience is on about a 30-second delay, so we'll just give it 1 second. Oh, Thiago says yes. Okay, feel free to jump in whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Oh.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm having all kinds of issues today. I'm sorry. Just 1 moment so I can put on my slides that I can't seem to find now. Okay. Can you see them? No, right?
We cannot. Did you use the share screen button on the bottom?
I did. Anyway, yeah, I'll go without the slides. So, yeah, let's go.
Welcome to the service.
So, hello everybody. Good morning. Sorry for the tech issues. My name is Thiago Souza. I am a PhD student from Minho University, back in Braga, Portugal. Today I'll be addressing the Marica citizen basic income that was already briefly addressed by the last presentation. The Marica Citizen Basic Income Program is part of my PhD research, and so I will talk about today I'll bring to you some introductory notes about the city. I'll talk about a bit about the program, and finally, I'll bring up some preliminary points of debate that can be drawn from this experience and how this can be used in my research. First of all, as it was already stated, but I will just have a quick overlook here. Marica is a small city located in the Rio de Janeiro states. It's a richer city than the rest of Brazil. So because you have the oil exploration in the city that funds the basic income projects, so we have a less smaller reduced poverty and extreme poverty rates in the city, and you have less inequality in comparison to the rest of Brazil. Most of the city's revenue come from the oil profits, and Marica is a city that has been governed for the left wing spectrum since the last decades. This party, the Workers' Party, which is the main party in the left wing in Brazil right now, was responsible for the implementation of the basic income program. The program was implemented officially in 2013. The only conditionalities of the program was that the households that were enrolled needed to gain until 3 minimum wages as a total monthly income, and they needed to be residents of Marica for at least 3 years. The program was initiated as a payment of 85 with what they call mombucas, that is the e-currency, as it was already said in the last presentation. And each mombuca refers to R$1, which is the Brazilian official currency. So it was a one-to-one exchange. It is worth pinpointing that this mombuca currency is only accepted inside Marica's city limits. So the beneficiaries cannot spend this money outside the city, which generates a circular economy that is vital for the functioning and maintaining of the project of the pilots. The program was gradually developed through the years. In 2015, the payment that was of 85 mombucas got up to 95. In 2017, the payment rose to 130 mombucas, and in 2019, the payment began to be performed towards individuals and no longer households. The last update was in May 2022 of this year, and the payment was again enhanced to 200 mombucas. Nowadays, the payment reaches more than 1/4 of the population of the city, which is 27% of the population, and the 25% of the city's GDP is transferred to the basic income projects. Along the basic income projects, there were also other social policies that were implemented, such as scholarships, saving accounts for public and private students. The public transportation was made free for the residents, and there was also a broad basic income of 300 mombucas paid to indigenous residents of the city. Additionally, there was the creation of the sovereign wealth funds with the oil profits, which had as a goal to make the basic income projects independent from this oil funding. So you can create an independent funding to perpetuate this basic income program. In the COVID pandemic, it was also quite astonishing face that the City Hall of Marica had, since there was a lot of aid towards the beneficiaries of the basic income, giving out loans, food baskets, and enhancing the payments in the months of the beginning of the pandemic, which was very helpful to the residents. And this is also quite remarkable in Brazil, because Brazil had a weak response to the COVID. So Marica was kind of a special case in this one. And now going on to the implication and related outcomes that we can already pinpoint from this experience, this project. Of course, when analyzed, it needs to be seen as a small city case. The Marica project, even though is one of the most successful in the world right now concerning basic income projects, it's a municipality case, and it can't be how can I put this? It can't be compared to nationwide pilots. But still, we have a lot of lessons to learn. The oil funding, I see it as an issue, and this is what one of my points that I develop in my research. We are going towards, in the world, towards a green economy horizon, and we need to find more creative taxation methods to fund the basic income. And this is one of the big obstacles in Marica right now to perpetuate the basic income, and that's why the sovereign wealth fund is quite important, and it needs to be thoroughly addressed. The Momuka e-currency is probably one of the best lessons for us here to learn, and as it is done in South Korea and Berlin, the e-currency can be seen as an important aspect of the basic income projects yet to come. Marica shows how it is important to implement, alongside the basic income, big sets of social policies in coordination with the basic income, so we don't have not only a focus on the enhancements of the consumption power of the beneficiaries, but you also address but you also tackle the welfare state, and you're also able to improve the well-being of the citizens, not only by consumption but also by public servicing. And Marica is a big example of how you can develop and implement a basic income projects in an unequal country, an unequal society. Since Brazil is one of the most unequal countries in the world, you need to start basic income projects, such as was with the Bolsa Família projects. You need to start with the poorest segments of the society, and gradually you will be enhancing the program towards the entire of society, as the basic income is originally idealized. Now, just wrapping up my presentation, the next steps will be to discuss these implications of the Marica program, and comparing it to the theory of the basic income. So what I aim to address in my PhD research is which supporting policies will be better combined with the basic income pilots, which will be the laboral consequences that basic income pilots can bring up to the societies where they are implemented, how the basic income middles with individual autonomy, how can we talk about a fairer taxation system, how it can address the ecological matter, how we can combine the basic income with ecological sustainability, and also perform comparisons between pilots, especially Marica, and with pilots in the US, pilots in Europe, the pilots in South Korea, and more specifically the pilots that it is yet to be implemented in Portugal, in the city called Alcácer do Sal. But since we don't have any specific dates for the release of the program, we are now having a bit of an issue to idealize this comparison. But concerning Marica, it will be interesting to see how the city can show the theory of the basic income wrong or correct in this instance and steps that I gave right now. Unfortunately, I can't show here my slides because I had the references here that helped me through my research, but I thank you for your attention and for the opportunity.
Thiago, great to have you with us. All right, there is one question in the chat. How is money created in circles? Julio, are you still there?
Julio is here, but he's participating as an audience, so I can tell as much as I know. In circles, everyone gets 1 circles an hour. which in Berlin equals around 72 euros a month, 24 circles a day, and 720 circles every 30 days in a month. So more people participate in, then more amount of circle circulation as they spend it. So this is how it works in Circles UBI.
So much. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat, so we'll wrap it up here. I'm going to thank all the presenters for being with us and sticking with us through tech issues. Thanks, everyone.